You know that feeling when the economy seems like it's a car, just speeding up and slowing down all on its own, and we're all just passengers? Well, turns out there is a driver's seat, and the government has a whole set of controls, a steering wheel, a gas pedal, and a brake to try and keep the ride as smooth as possible. That whole dashboard of controls, that's what we call fiscal policy.
So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll nail down exactly what fiscal policy is. Then, we'll check out the main tools the government uses to get the job done. We'll look at how they step on the gas when things are slow and how they tap the brakes when things get a little too hot. And finally, we'll get real and ask, just how easy is it to actually steer a multi-trillion-dollar economy?
All right, let's get right into it. Before we start talking about the nuts and bolts, what even is fiscal policy when you get right down to it? Yeah, we all feel those ups and downs, right? The booms feel amazing, but the slowdowns, they can be pretty scary. And it makes you wonder, is anyone actually trying to manage this ride, or is it all just happening at random? Well, the answer is a definite yes. Governments are absolutely trying to steer.
Okay, so here's the official definition. At its core, fiscal policy is really about two big things: how much the government spends and how much it collects in taxes. You can think of it like a country's budget, but it's got a much bigger mission than just balancing the books. The real goal here is to keep the economy growing at a nice, steady pace and to stop the prices of everyday things from spinning out of control.
So, if fiscal policy is the big plan, what are the actual controls the government gets to use? Well, it turns out they really only have two main levers to pull.
First up, there's government spending. This is when the government is actually buying stuff, building roads, funding schools, paying for defense. It's like a direct shot of cash right into the economy's bloodstream. And then there's taxation. This is the government taking money out of our pockets and out of company bank accounts. This changes how much money we all have left over to spend or invest. So one's the gas pedal, and the other, it's kind of like adjusting the fuel flow to the engine. And when we say taxes, it's not just one thing. They basically come in two main flavors. You've got direct taxes, which are taken right out of your income or a company's profits, like the income tax you see on your paycheck. Then there are indirect taxes. These are the ones added on to stuff you buy, like sales tax on a new TV or those extra fees on gas and cigarettes. They take different routes, but they both end up with the government.
Okay, so now that we know the tools, let's see how they're used. What happens when the economy's feeling a little sluggish, a little slow? Well, the government can decide it's time to step on the accelerator. We call this expansionary policy. And the goal here is pretty straightforward. Give the economy a jolt to bring it back to life. So anytime you hear about stimulus packages or economic recovery plans during a downturn, this is what they're talking about. The whole point is to get businesses hiring again and to get people spending money, to get things moving. So here's how it's supposed to play out. It all starts with a problem. Say a recession where unemployment is climbing. The government then takes action. It either starts spending more money on things like big infrastructure projects, or it cuts taxes, leaving more cash in our wallets. The idea is that with more money, we and businesses will spend more. And that boost in total spending, which economists call aggregate demand, is meant to get the whole economic engine turning over again.
But what about the opposite problem? What if the economy is running way too hot? Like a car with the engine in the red. In that case, the government needs to gently tap the brakes, and that's called contractionary policy.
Now, the goal here is super important. It's not to stop the economy cold, but just to cool it off a bit. See, when everybody's spending a ton of money, but there isn't enough stuff to go around, prices shoot up. That's inflation. Contractionary policy is the government's way of trying to ease up before that gets out of control.
And the playbook for this is the exact mirror image of what we just saw. The problem is an overheating economy, and prices are rising too fast. So the government acts by either cutting its own spending or by raising taxes. The result? We all have less money to spend. And with less overall spending, the economy starts to cool down, which takes the pressure off of those rising prices.
So let's just pull over for a second and look at this all side by side. It really lays it all out. You've got expansionary policy, which is all about boosting growth. It uses lower taxes and higher spending, and yeah, that usually means the government's budget goes into a deficit. On the other side, you've got contractionary policy to fight inflation. It uses higher taxes and lower spending, which can push the budget toward a surplus. Two very different strategies for two very different problems. Okay, so this all sounds pretty neat and tidy, right? You just pick the right tool for the job.
But of course, in the real world, it's so much messier. Let's dig into why it's actually so hard to get behind the wheel and drive.
So check this out, because this is where things get really interesting. What if the government gives everyone a tax cut, but nobody spends the extra money? There's this theory called Ricardian equivalence that says people are actually pretty smart. We know that if the government cuts taxes today, it has to borrow money. And we also know that debt has to be paid back eventually, which probably means higher taxes down the road. So what do? We save the tax cut to pay for that future tax hike. And if that's true, a huge piece of the government stimulus plan just disappears.
And that's just one problem. First, there's what you could call a forecasting fog. The models economists use to predict where the economy is going, they're often wrong. So the government might be hitting the gas when it should be braking. Then there's the calibration issue. How big of a tax cut or spending increase is just right? 100 billion? 500? It's almost impossible to know the perfect amount. And finally, there's us, people. We're unpredictable. A policy that's supposed to make us confident might actually spook us, completely flipping the intended result on its head.
So all of this leaves us with one last really big question. When we think about the government managing the economy, should we be picturing a surgeon with a scalpel making these tiny, precise little cuts? Or is it more like a mechanic with a sledgehammer, a really powerful but sometimes clumsy and unpredictable tool? Honestly, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And figuring out when to be the surgeon and when to be the mechanic, well, that's the billion-dollar question that keeps policymakers up at night.